Welcome to Easier Habits Live. I'm Alec from Easier Habits. Let me adjust the camera a little bit.
And I'm Meg. I'm a global English communication coach.
All right, so we are going to go through Meg's priorities this week, and we'll talk today about creating packages for your service. And I think that's a great example of something that feels easy to agonize over,
right?
But you really could technically do it in half an hour, right? So we'll talk about that after the communication tip.
Yay! Okay, communication tip. So, in my daily, little room that I do on Clubhouse, I've been trying to help them, again, explain this idea of a community mechanism. And, I think I've mentioned this before, that it's more about understanding what the thing is itself, rather than just like the English, right? You can't explain it in English if you don't understand the concept in your own language. But, and so we worked through that. And then finally, yesterday, it was really great. We got to a point where, understanding things in the simplest of terms, right? So what is it? What is it connected to, right? And then kind of the whys, right? Or the 5/6 W questions, like who, what, when, where, how, and why. So if you can understand the purpose and then all of those things, it becomes super simple, right? So, I was going through all of that. Who? Well, everybody. And the what? Well, it, does this thing. And then finally by the end, we got to this point where I was able to say, okay, so anything needs to get done, right? And if you have to pay for it, it's market mechanism. If you don't have to pay for it, but the government handles it, it's the public mechanism. And if you don't have to pay for it and the government doesn't do it, then it's probably the community mechanism. And there's a lot more nuance to it than that, but breaking it down so simply, I finally was able to help people understand, like, oh, okay, cool. This applies to like everything, all interactions. And so not everybody is going to be able to go through that same intense process that you do. And that's kind of one of the things that I was realizing, that, okay, yes, they need to understand a certain level of it, I guess, but they don't need to have this full understanding of all of economics, right? That's too much. So there's a happy medium, and finding that for whoever it is that you're working with is important. And it's okay if it's something that you work through, right? I went through into it with an idea of what I wanted to teach. It wasn't working, or it wasn't having the results that I was hoping for. And so then I kind of took a step back and tried a couple of different things, right? And then realizing the most important pieces, breaking that down as far as what they absolutely needed to understand, and then finding a simple way to explain it is really nice. And I know that that's not necessarily how all of us have been taught, right? Because in school, they teach subjects, not people, right? And so people, teachers generally have this idea of what they want to teach you, as opposed to what you actually need to know, or what will be useful to you, knowing how to, use the information or whatever. And so for you as a communicator, right, really think about the information that the other person wants and or needs, and how you can convey that to them in a way that they will be able to receive it, especially when it's these like really high complex things.
Well, and the specific strategy you used was basically definition by subtraction. It's not these things.
Yes.
And I mean, that's a good place to start with difficult concepts. Is mapping out what it's not. And actually going back to, we mentioned last week, what I was going to do to take a difficult coding problem and make it simpler. Well, this week, even though I was mostly watching kids yesterday and they were fighting and all of that, well, I removed elements from the equation so that it was simpler to deal with that, right? And I, subtracted elements, and then I was able to find the parts that had an issue, and then just realized apparently they just don't work together, and it's not even me.
Yeah.
And that there's some tools people have used to get around that, but that idea of when something is complex, remove large portions. I know it's not that.
Yes.
Right? That works with definitions. That works with learning skills.
It really
all
does.
All sorts of stuff.
And yeah, and one of the first things that I would recommend taking out is any of the why, right? Like when you're doing something for yourself, they always say start with why. And when you're taking out stuff that makes it complex, take out the why, right? Focus on what. Especially because, when we first started doing this, the person who had done the original presentation on the community mechanism understands it very, very well. And so she's talking about like these long-reaching consequences of population numbers and a declining birth rate and, failing government programs. And everybody's like, okay, so community mechanism, declining birth rate. And they're trying to learn all these really yes, they are related, but they're not necessary to understanding what that thing is, right? That comes later. So taking out the why first and focusing on the what.
I mean, I'd have questions about that as a general statement, just because the relevance of something.
The relevance is
relevance
important.
is the why we're talking about it. So I'm kind of curious, like, what why do you imagine throwing out?
Well, let's see. Not the immediate relevance, right? The kind of the consequences of that thing, I guess, the farther reaching ones. So the relevance, kind of taking that step back and being, because again, I was asking, what is the community mechanism? And then they would start talking, well, right now there's a lot of problems with the declining birth rate and low employment, issues at care centers and
things
like
kind of
that.
Second order consequences.
Okay, yes, that's the word I was looking for. So, yes, again, they are important, but when you're understanding the core concept, they are secondary, right? They're outside of that. And so taking all of that away and really focusing on the core of it.
Yep. Yay for simplification. I was telling Meg the other night that I relearned this life lesson from Magic the Gathering, where they have a format where you can have the minimum size of your deck for this card game is 60, but you can add in more cards, and it's always tempting to add more, and then your cards, like your deck, slowly creep up from 60 to 80 or 100 or whatever. And then you can't reliably get the cards you want because there's so many cards to get through. And so the other night I'm like, all right, I'm going to rebuild a new deck from scratch, because it's always hard to go down from 100 cards to 60. And the 60 card one did a lot better. And I'm like, oh, this is true even in my hobbies.
Right.
So it's hard to cut things out, right? But your value, and I think this is a lot of again, one of the ways that school damages us. Our value is in knowing 100% of the things.
100% of
all of the things, right? All of the time, because we might be tested on them. Versus like the value of knowing the most important things and being able to apply them, right? And that's where most of your value happens in business, in your own personal impact on your own business, but also like the value you're giving to other people. Like, people are awash in information that, Google knows more than any of us will ever have to know, right? And so the value is not in capturing all that information and shoving it in someone's face. The value is in being able to highlight for someone, like, here's the most important thing for you right now that you're going to get the most mileage out of.
Definitely.
Go for it.
Yeah, well, and as part of that too, I do feel like as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at focusing on the things that actually matter, right? And accepting that, like, I remember, being younger, everyone's like, you need to be well-rounded, you need to do sports and arts and smart stuffs and all of these things. And I hated sports. I didn't want to do sports, but I always felt really bad for not doing sports because people said that I should, to be a well-rounded person. Now I believe in like being physically healthy, but I don't have to do sports to do that. So yay. But then, as I've gotten older and I've been able to cut those things out of my life that I wasn't really doing in the first place, what I have still struggled with a lot is cutting out those things that I am doing that are no longer serving me, right? Because sometimes when you're trying something new, you'll try a bunch of things, and that's great. And then you want to kind of pick the thing that you're going to focus on, right? We've been talking about focus a lot lately, and then just go with that. But I have a hard time then saying no to those other things that I've tried that are still kind of going and I could continue, but are now distracting me from the thing that I actually want to do.
Is there a way to blank slate it?
That sounds very extreme.
Well, I mean, it's the idea of like, it's always hard to cut things out. It's so much easier to start from scratch and add only the most important things in.
Yeah. And I guess I kind of sort of did that a little bit this last summer after my surgery. And still somehow, you know, there's other things that creep in. I've been able to keep some other things out, but then, you know, I don't know. Or I guess there's also, it's not just work stuff too, right? So like my room is still a mess and I really want to get that done, but I'm so focused on this other stuff and I feel bad for not doing it. And I could just blank slate it by getting rid of everything that I own, I guess. But then I'm gonna like need it at some point, and yeah.
Or are you, if you haven't used it in months and it's just been sitting on the floor?
Right. Good point. So yeah, honestly, but even taking the time to, you know, do that will still take away from, you know, other things, and so it's yeah, I probably overcomplicate things, right, when it would just be a lot easier, but because I overcomplicate it, I'm able to then ignore it and not have to deal with it.
Yeah, we'll have to actually move that exercise machine out of the center of our
yes.
I
got a standing that thing called a treadmill desk, which I'm so excited, but it is taking up like our front room downstairs, which means I need to finish my cleaning stuff so I can get that moved upstairs. Yeah, my goal is to have that by the end of the week.
That'd be great.
Yay.
So all right, so in priorities, right, you identified there's the offers, there's outreach, and I forget what the third thing is.
Content,
yeah. And so the offers are something that enable you to really leverage all of the outreach and actually get more clients. And you don't absolutely have to have that up front, but on the other hand, actually being able to advertise that up front makes a lot of the outreach easier, or like being able to build up to that makes the outreach easier.
Exactly.
So how's the work on offers going?
That was really great. That's what I focused on yesterday. And one of the things that I've realized over these last couple of months is that I need to start analog before I go digital. And so I just used my notebooks that have a billion and one things everywhere. I tore out pages from other things and I put it all out in front of me. I probably look like a crazy person because I was doing this in our grocery store down the street.
Nice.
I would have done this at the library, but it was a holiday yesterday. So the library was closed. And I thought, dang, where can I go that will have Wi-Fi, a table, and I can hang out there for 4 hours. And I thought about going to like a Starbucks or something, but I'm like, I don't want to do this at a Starbucks. I don't want to smell coffee all day. But also, like, I don't know, that just feels weird. But Randall's, our grocery store, has this great big area with tables, and the bathroom and drinking fountain are right there. It's got like a fireplace. I don't know why, but it does. And I'd be able to get any food that I needed, and they have free Wi-Fi. So I was like, okay, I'm going to look like a crazy person today. It's going to be great. And I got all of my stuff laid out and was able to say, okay, simplest packages that I know people want based on the research stuff that I've done that I know I'm good at, that I want to be doing. And so I was able to organize all of those things and put it as an outline into then also taking the stuff that we can say his name now, right? Our marketing, Jeremy Coates. He's great.
Yeah, innovative marketing.
Yes, we love him. He's our marketing consultant, and he's been really good about helping me to kind of conceptualize the idea of an easy offer, right? Something that's a small kind of entryway that is still paid, right? It's different from your lead magnets, but it could also be like a downsell if someone's not ready for the premium service. As well as, you know, what are those different tiers of service? The done for you, done with you, done, or do it yourself. And so then thinking, okay, well, what are discrete packages that I could offer? Well, I could offer all of these, right? Which I'd actually worked on brainstorming a couple weeks ago. So I was able to take those and take the content that I already have and say which ones would be the easiest to say, like, and not do any prep work or anything, and I could just do it now. So I have, like, 3 to 5, or I think I have 5 of those very, like, clear, distinct packages based on that stuff of what I want to be working on, the people I want to be working with. As well as, a couple of other add-ons or whatever. And then I had to think about, okay, what would the downsell be? What is the very smallest one? That would be, for different things, right? If we're talking about the pitch one, it would be, once they've done the pitch template, meeting with me to have a consultation on what their pitch is going to be, giving them some tips, having them go do it, meeting back or work on it, and then meeting back again and going through what they have and giving some feedback, and then having them, practice, and then one final follow-up on their kind of presentation skills. So it would be like a 3-session thing plus a little bit of outside stuff to get someone ready to give a pitch. And I was like, that's a great introductory thing. So I, set that all out and then did that for the other ones. I like thinking about the really big fancy packages, like the high end, like where I will be, it sounds weird, but like your like companion at a conference companion, which sounds silly, but really that person who can help you with those introductions and to, for non-native speakers, right, make sure that you're where you need to be at the right time and that you're not misunderstanding anything, right, that's in English. I love the idea of doing that. I really want to do that. I also recognize that that's not going to be the bulk of my clients, especially starting out, because that's, super high-end service, and I need to kind of work my way up to that.
Kind of like an English executive concierge or something.
Yeah, so like not even a translator necessarily, because again, I can do some translating, but that's not really my skill set. It's that making sure that people understand what the other person's trying to say, and that has something to do with the actual words. But I've heard so many conversations between native speakers and non-native speakers where they're both speaking the same language, they're both using the right words, and they're both misunderstanding the other person because they don't get the intent of what the other person is asking, right? And or what the other person is saying, or vice versa. And so being that person, and that's really hard to quantify. So what I did, though, because that again isn't my priority right now, is I took a bunch of notes on the side. I had another thing that I had over to the side where I was like, okay, remember this thing for later, so that I could get my focus back to what it was that I was working on. And continuing with some of the research. So I bring my laptop out every once in a while and say, okay, what are the packages that look like this that the other coaches that I found are offering? What are their price points? Am I in the right ballpark? And knowing that I don't have to do it exactly the way that they do, but it's a good place to start. So yeah, that's what I did for like 4 hours yesterday. And I still have some organization to do, but I really am at the point where I just need to put together my package list with here's what you get, here's the price point, 1, 2, 3, go. So that's my priority for today.
So how long would that take you to do?
Probably not as long as all my stuff yesterday. So I'm gonna say, because I want to also make it look good, right? Like this is like a what's that thing called? A catalog? A pricing catalog or package catalog or something like that. So I'd like it to look nice. Canva has a bunch of like templates for stuff like this, so I don't have to work a lot on that. I'm going to say like I should get it done in an hour, which means it will take at least 2, which then I could probably extend, but I'm going to try to limit myself to 2, because if I extend it past that, then I'm probably doing things that don't matter.
Well, and you're making it look pretty. So, like, what kind of deliverable are you creating?
A PDF.
Oh, okay, a PDF that you could share with people.
Yep.
All right. Okay, yeah. So
you could even be
as long as
printed out. Like, it would be
Yeah.
like a brochure or something
Right.
like that.
and you could copy pieces of that to your website, etc.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So you have a deliverable, and then, so what kind of, like, how's the outreach going?
I didn't do as much yesterday as I wanted to, mostly because again, like, I can time box, but sometimes my brain inertia, right, is resisting, switching tasks or, yeah, there's just a lot of stuff.
All right, well, I mean, you'll focus on getting that PDF out.
Yes.
And then probably, I mean, realistically, a good chunk of your additional work time will then just be reorganizing your outreach. And then tomorrow we can talk about, now that you're starting to get back into the swing of things, what are your goals? How are you going to achieve them?
Yeah.
And we talked about various automations or
Yes.
ways to, like, reach out through multiple channels at once,
Yep.
or collect messages from multiple channels at once. So we can, maybe that would also be something to look into.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about that. So, yeah, how we're going to take these offerings and then do the manual outreach while Jeremy is helping us, do some of the strategy and the design around, the content and funnels and all that kind of more automated outreach.
Yeah. Also, hi, viewer.
Hi.
It's so exciting seeing those.
Yeah, well, and I'm about to wrap up with a business tip, but if there are any questions, we absolutely could address them if you want to throw them in the chat right now.
Yeah.
But while you might be thinking about that, then, and if this is helpful, like, subscribe, all that stuff. We are live every 8 a.m. Central Time. Weekdays, yes. So live streaming, and we're building a community. We've had some great support from some of our viewers, especially around the meditation episode, which was specifically requested. So we do requests.
Yes.
And we'd love to have a more engaged community of entrepreneurs, people building their business, supporting each other, asking questions, etc. So with that, my business tip of the day is the power of defaults. And this is one, so here's the narrowest possible version of this, but you can use it in lots of different areas. But Alex Hormozy was saying that one of the people he learned to sell from was someone who had done, like, the care of, like, fur coats or something like that. He'd worked with someone, as a kid or whatever, who had a business like that.
Cool.
And they were saying, like, there's several packages for, like, taking care of this, for the winter, like storing it or whatever, so it doesn't get musty and moth-eaten and whatnot. But saying that, like, there's one of the ways they upsold people was they just said, so you would like the winter care plus whatever optional upsell. Is there anything else you want? I.e., their default was, you're taking this and that upsell, and and then maybe even you're and the only question is, do you want more than that, right? And they set that default, and a lot of people just went with it, and I can so see myself doing that, whether or not I want the upsell, just being like, okay, I guess if this is the default, that's what I want. Like, people do that a lot, right?
They do, and I hate it.
Well, like, if it's actually what people need.
And that right there,
Right.
I think, is the really key part. I
Right.
think there's a lot of salesy, things that are just like, oh, I just want to, nickel and dime you, get everything out of you that I can.
Right.
And, when they're really not caring about the value that you're getting.
Right. Like the protection policies you get on Amazon or whatever that, like, nobody uses, right? But, like, they have it by default. Hopefully, like, by default, they don't opt you into that.
Yeah.
That would be wrong. But especially if sales or marketing is hard for you, really one of the underlying problems is, like, by default you're expecting a no, and you're assuming you're going to have to convince them to buy.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if you actually have a service that works and they have the problem that you solve, you should assume that like the default is like, so you are looking for, like someone comes to you with the problem that you solve, and so like, so you are looking for my package, you know, and then you could go into the upsells and say, you know, so you want this, you know, would you like anything else? You know, that kind of thing works very accurately if you want, but you know, it works very accurately. And again, you want to do it in a non-scummy way, right? I don't remember whether the upsell or whatever was like necessary or ideal or whatever. Like I don't remember it being, you know, something that just felt scummy or whatever, but I also don't know how to take care of fur coats. So
fair enough.
But that's the power of defaults. But this is true in everything that you do. And sometimes if you are running into problems, not just with sales or other things, you might examine what is your defaults. Are you defaulting, you know, what is your default when you don't know what to do for the day, right? Or if you don't have your priorities outlined, right? If it's less than productive, that's because those are your defaults. And that's, you know, priorities are helpful because they help you train new defaults, you know. And or routines can, you know, that you intentionally implement can help you settle into a new default. So by default, you, instead of checking email first thing in the morning, you follow up with what's most important, and then you know, check up with email afterwards, etc. So
and so those defaults, like, they can be hard to change. They're also very possible to change. And then I also think there's like a default for defaults where we have a tendency without even noticing to subconsciously slip back into, you know, a certain type of default. And so it requires, again, that reflection, I think, to think about it and really, you know, be honest, like, what are the results of this thing? So like, you know, recently with, I'm so stressed, you know, what's my default when I get stressed? Well, you know, find some way to make my brain be quiet. But it wasn't so much that I was dealing with. It was what I am realizing now is that I'm getting more stressed out more easily than I used to, right? My comfort zone has expanded, and every time I get out of that, I'm like, or has shrunk, I guess. And so every time I get out of it, I'm like, so instead of focusing so much on what do I do when I get stressed, it's how do I be okay being stressed? So making sure that you're working on the right default, I think, is good.
So which default were you working on?
I was working on what to do when I get stressed and like dealing with those hard emotions and things like that. But I'm reading this really, really great book about, it's like Your Instincts Are Killing You or something like that, that talks about how all of the comforts and ease that we have in life have made us more, you know, susceptible to freaking out when things are uncomfortable and more averse to experiencing discomfort. And this is not something that's a new concept to me, but it's one I hadn't thought about for a while, and definitely had fallen back into those habits of being comfortable or, you know, only accepting difficult things in certain spheres of my life rather than just as a condition of existence. So.
Yeah. Well, and as an entrepreneur starting a business, if you're comfortable, you're probably doing it wrong, unless you're already making millions of dollars, in which case, go for it.
Yeah.
Like, right? And millions of dollars in profit, you know, versus you could be, you know, almost broke and still be technically making millions of dollars in revenue.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that comfort zone thing is a killer. And
it is a total killer.
I'm still trying to figure out how to help my kids understand that.
And it is nice though, being a parent, like, not that, you know, we are perfect, or not that you should learn from your kids, but you have the option to learn from your children. And watching especially our oldest kid kind of try to buck against the systems that are just the way life works, and you can't really change them when you're 8 years old. Is kind of helping me to reframe some of the things that I struggle with, and being like, okay, am I throwing a metaphorical hissy fit? Yeah. Let's stop that.
Yep.
It's not effective. It's just exhausting me. And I always want it to be effective. I want to think that, you know, raging against whatever will have some effect, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
So.
I think a lot of the areas people struggle with are places where they are resisting something by default,
Yeah.
as opposed to intentionally moving towards something or going with the flow. And either one of those things, right? So if you're very naturally accepting and you're just like, oh, that's how it is, whatever, right? That's great. That's a very acceptable default.
Yes.
Or intentionally moving things, but like where you get stuck is where you're resisting things, but by default. So you're not clear on why or how. You're just kind of stuck in the mode of I hate this.
Yep.
That's a rough default. So. In a summary again, the easy way to deal with this is just like in sales, right? The power of defaults in sales, and expect, right? The default is if someone has the problem that you solve and you solve it well, the default is you'd expect them to buy that. And you can use that in their language. Like, so you're looking for this. Here's my package. Would you like anything else, right?
Yep.
Showing them that the default is they do something to help themselves. They take action. They actually make a change in their lives. And the question is like how much change do they want, rather than like they're just gonna just keep grinding through the same problem.
Yeah.
And then the deeper message is for you, if you're grinding through the same problem over and over again, examine your defaults. Are you resisting something where you don't need to be resisting? Or maybe you do need to be resisting, but you need to figure out a smarter way of doing it.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thank you very much. And of course, until tomorrow, make big changes one small habit at a time.
Bye.